Terry. Hey, Christian.
Hi there.
Hey.
Morning.
All things at your end, Terry? All good? All safe?
Yeah, fine, no problems here, thanks. How are things with you?
Where exactly you are? In which part of the US?
I'm actually on a small island just off the coast of France.
Oh, you are in Europe. Okay. 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 For some reason, I thought you were in US.
Yeah, well, I'm in Jersey, but I'm in old Jersey.
Oh, yeah. What's the current time there?
It's 4:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, okay. Okay. So not bad. So let's wait. So internally, I mean, just quick on Christian, myself, we have been having a lot of discussions internally with the teams. There's quite aggressively, the work is going on to the Tecton and Qflow pipeline side. We have actually engaged, a couple of Tecton folks from the community as well, right? So let's see, if folks don't join here, we can probably, unless you have something, we can, kill the call. Let's wait for a couple of more minutes. And because, in general, we are having quite a lot of meetings, and I'm now going to force, a couple of the folks from the Google side on a subsequent call, right? So that's what I want to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see the announcement from Google where they actually launched Kubeflow pipelines in production onto the public cloud?
No, I hadn't seen that.
Okay, let me see if I have the link. So the thing is, we haven't yet seen Tecton productized by Google, but Kubeflow pipeline has been. So France is not as impacted. I found the link. I'm pinging it in the chat. Hi, who joined? Is it OSOBH?
Hey guys, this is Omar Sob. I was just joining you guys, first time joiner. Saw the SIG, was interested in seeing what you guys were doing.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, what organization do you represent, Omar?
So I'm with Apple.
Okay. Okay. So, I just pinged the link in the chat, right? So, Terry, for you, right? In general, and so Omar, I mean, one of the things we do discuss, and some of the stakeholders are not there. So there are two ways, this MLOps SIG goes. One is essentially where we, proceed through a technical charter, which is essentially, the integration needed on the current CI/CD pipelines, right, to make them more MLOps oriented. And the second is what Terry leads, which is essentially, the roadmap and vision for what does MLOps mean, right? So both these groups sort of work independently. A lot of the work happens, outside, and this mostly becomes a melting point of, getting the folks together. So I think the link which I pinged was essentially, if you look at it, so that's what is, this year in general in the industry, right? I mean, this emergence of, cloud AI platform pipelines, right? And is going to become, more and more prominent, right? So obviously, if you see what Google ended up launching is the Kubeflow pipelines as a service, right? And the two key things to note in this is they've, done they've taken the route that, it's not only just the Qflow pipeline SDK, but the TFX SDK as well, because TFX just on its own is not that hugely known, but TensorFlow, as we all know, is a gorilla, and they want to make sure, the end users coming from the TensorFlow side also have a way to, run different components of TensorFlow, whether it's the data validation, model analysis, using the TFX SDK onto this platform. And over a period of time, right, what will happen is, both the Qflow pipeline SDK as well as the TFX SDK, they are going to merge into one. Now, I think we have discussed quite a few times, right, that the pipelines are taking us from A to B, but from MLOps perspective, right, the whole notion of lineage tracking is very important. So they have done, quite a bit of work in terms of, ensuring that, what we are showing here, it's not generic, CI/CD pipeline, but, if you look at generating the graphs, etc., for different steps of the pipeline, then, the artifact and the lineage tracking. So if you can see here, here, so like, all the artifacts which are getting produced as part of when the pipelines are running, right, they are versioned and stored. And then you can actually, in the end also run through the lineage of everything being produced. Let me kill this Slack. It's distracting me. Oh yeah. Yeah. And be able to trace back, right, where, what was the data set, used to train the model, what was the TensorFlow version, what was the output of different components, right? So very, very rich lineage explorer also inbuilt. Now, so, and so I think in general, there is a very strong adoption for this in the community. And obviously for us, the core effort is to see, if we can get to this stage, but replace the Argo engine under the covers with Tekton, right? So that's strategically, given that there is a lot of investment in Tekton from Red Hat, from IBM, and even Google, right? So one of the things which we do want to understand is that Tekton as a project, oriented from Google's initially, right? And so want to see, their perspective as well on, in general, the longer term, this whole engine is based on Tekton under the covers, right? Doing the native CI/CD work. Yeah, so,
I had a quick question. So how does that play when you have like Argo and Flux are trying to combine forces, and does that affect this in any way with some of the work that's being done in combination?
Sorry, what's the question?
So we have like, like in the CI, like cloud native CI/CD space, we see we have like, we have Weave, Flux, and Argo, and Tekton, and a couple other tools. So following kind of like the GitOps flow with Argo and Weave, they've kind of combined forces, and they're trying to kind of port their work together into a singular kind of repository. There's some ongoing work with that. I think there was another SIG for that. So what I was wondering is if that has an effect on how the Argo workflow engine operates now, if there's anybody looking at this kind of changes, or if there are even changes worth talking about.
Yeah. So what other SIG you're saying is effectively discussing the inclusion? By the way, I mean, I didn't. So where do you join us from? Like, what's your charter?
Oh, okay. So just a little bit of background on myself. So Omar, so I'm representing just kind of cloud technologies at Apple. So kind of our technology, or kind of like our charters, look at multi-cloud kind of strategies for CI/CD. And a lot of my work is also focusing on the intelligence side of CI/CD. So I saw that you guys had this SIG and MLOps, and I was interested to see, because we're looking at Google Cloud for a lot of the services and operations as well for some of the stuff we're doing. So it's interesting to see what's being done in that space. And,
I guess you're probably more interested in the roadmap side of things at the moment. Then um, perhaps we can have a quick chat about that and
Sure.
help to explain what we're doing. The idea really is whilst obviously there are a number of teams involved within the CD Foundation that already have CD platforms that are existing and out there and are being extended to incorporate machine learning aspects. We feel it's really important that we actually get a solid grasp on what MLOps really needs to do and what the customer demand is, because right now, if you look at the way things are developing in the space, they're being driven in a typical fashion by, you know, we can do X and Y, so let's just add a bit of machine learning to that and see what happens. But things have not really been driven from a full-on understanding of what the problem space is, what the challenges are that the customers are facing in that area, and what the longer-term roadmap is going to need to look like, especially for supporting larger customers where really the machine learning aspects need to be pushed right down into silicon, and you know, where you're looking to develop tooling that can then get pushed down into you know, individual components that become very cheap to deliver and easy to mass produce. So the idea was to put together a roadmap to capture as many of these requirements as possible, and start to paint a picture of what's possible today, what's expected in the future, and what we're going to need to do to get everybody aligned in delivering to those capabilities. So really the idea is very much an open collaboration here. We're encouraging everybody to get involved, read and contribute to the document, start to inform everyone of what the challenges are in the individual spaces that they're working in. And then over time, we'll start to draw that together into you know, some key pieces of technology that we need to develop collaboratively to move everybody forwards in the right direction.
Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah, so I think if you're looking at in general, you know, if you are at a point in the journey where you are sort of looking at, you know, I don't know, if for example, have you standardized within Apple on the underlying CI/CD pipelines? And then, you know, what you're probably looking at is, you know, what you standardize on is also the one which becomes the basis for your MLOps, or the one, you know, which you can actually expose to the machine learning engineers and data scientists, right, for machine learning needs. That's probably the intent on your side looking at this.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. That's the beginning piece is I mean, for me, is identifying kind of what would be kind of a best practices CI/CD pipeline for, and the thing is, there's so many different use cases, right? There's some machine learning use cases. There's just average migrations or application digital transformation use cases that need to be done. So a lot of these things, they require various different, you know, different tool sets to be able to accomplish them. So what I'm looking at kind of a future direction that doesn't require any kind of monolithic software stack. And I'm jabbing at Spinnaker, but it's pretty much, you know, because I was able to accomplish CI/CD through just stitching containers together a couple of years back, right? It wasn't something that was incredibly complex to kind of fathom, but given the nature of how people want to do deployment patterns and different features like that, then you kind of have to look at what can I do in terms of intelligence to handle these kind of different patterns for deployment. So then, you know, I'm just basically running around the circles of CI/CD pieces and seeing what's there. And then what I'm really want to tackle, I mean, I kind of see where the Google piece is. What I'm really looking at is, and I'll just share this with you guys, is that I see a lot of complexity being added to our kind of domain as we move forward. And this added complexity speaks to the amount of knowledge that needs to be consumed in order for one to become, proficient in these technologies, let's say. So moving forward. So the problem is that in my world, I see that there's enough actionable intelligence being emitted off of infrastructure, pipelines, users, repos, that I could assemble an intelligent way to start determining how, why, and when I should be making deployments and to which cloud. So that's kind of the frame of where I'm like, my mind is at right now. And now I can kind of see where Kubeflow as a service, right? Something like that would give me kind of the platform start to look at how I can achieve this kind of, this end goal that I'm looking for.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things, right? So Christian, one thing is, is Apple, I mean, and based on, I've been having, chat with a couple of folks within Apple as well. It
Sure.
seems Apple is also, heavily standardizing on Kubernetes, right? So there is a lot of work going on within Apple, right? Where your underlying platform is becoming Kubernetes. And if that is the route, I think what you're thinking is the right way if you're looking at two things. One, if you look at, the Kube native space, which is what they call, the technologies which essentially are born because, Kubernetes has become the ubiquitous and standard. So from that perspective, pipelines like Tecton or Jenkins X, right? They were essentially catered towards that, right? So Tecton specifically is essentially as Kube native as it gets in terms of, everything is architected as a custom resource, Kubernetes custom resource using Kubernetes CRDs, etc. So within that particular space, Tecton is becoming popular for the folks, who are standardizing on Kubernetes as their underlying platform. And although, the pre-existing pipelines, which are very popular, like Airflow in the machine learning space, Airflow or, Apache Beam, etc., they are being made to work on top of Kubernetes now, but it's not the same as, when you look at the right architectural way of putting something on Kubernetes. I think Tecton has that advantage because, it rose after the Kubernetes prominence. Now, if you're looking at a machine learning space on top of Kubernetes, so that's where, yes, definitely Kubeflow is getting a lot of adoption. And our charter specifically within this, so I pinged a doc, and let me, what we have been looking at technically has been, so like Tecton is, for us sort of right now becoming, the standardized CI/CD pipeline. So both IBM Cloud, public cloud DevOps services, as well as OpenShift have standardized on Tecton as the underlying CI/CD pipeline. Now for the machine learning pipeline, we have made a decision to go with Kubeflow pipelines, right? So there was a lot of back and forth and discussion between Airflow versus Kubeflow pipelines versus NiFi and Beam. And again, by virtue of us being a Kube native company at this point where everything is running on top of Kubernetes, the decision has been to go with Kubeflow pipelines. But what we want to do is, not consume Kubeflow pipelines as is, but essentially, so this is, the current stage where Kubeflow pipeline is. And what we essentially want to do is rebase Kubeflow pipelines on top of Tecton, right? So that essentially, ensures that, the underlying standardization around Tecton as a CI/CD pipeline is consumed, reused, right? So that's one of the, work which we are driving as part of this SIG as well, where essentially, how do we take this? So we have started, obviously the first phase, which we are almost getting completed, was around, the compilation. So you can take, the Kubeflow pipeline SDK, which is exposed to the data scientists and machine learning engineers, and compile back to a Tecton output, right? And then there are other phases. So I think depending on from where you are coming from, the first decision always becomes, if there is not a standardization around CI/CD pipeline, that's the first one you probably would want to make, and that will then help you decide, the upper layer, right? So now once you have standardized on a CI/CD pipeline, you probably would want to reuse that when you're looking at the machine learning use cases or ETL use cases, etc. Right? Yeah.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Yeah. So, and I think the point which I was making, earlier in the call was, so this work which we have been doing now, the goal is to engage Google heavily. I mean, Google is aware of it. The core repo is into the Kubeflow repository itself, where we are rebasing the whole of Kubeflow pipeline to run off Tecton. But now, we want to essentially push it to the point where it becomes, the core part of it, because yeah, for us, I think at this point, Tecton in general is becoming the strategy, and we want to make sure, rest of the use cases on top of it, whether they are machine learning, whether they are ETL oriented, we are building on top of Tecton rather than replacing Tecton and bringing specialized another set of pipelines. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, definitely interested to see how this progresses and see how we could definitely leverage that, because I have a couple of POCs I'm doing on GCP right now. So it'd be nice to give it a kind of, give it a test.
Great. Cool. Anything else, Terry or anyone else want to bring up? Otherwise we can.
Yeah, a couple of quick updates from me. There've been a few additions to the challenges table in the roadmap. I'm just going through the review process on that, and I'll publish those hopefully in a day or so. Also, we are arranging a second meeting for Asia Pacific. So there will be an alternate meeting time, which will be a few hours after this one, so that everyone in those time zones will be able to also collaborate on this. And I'll publish those details shortly.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks. Thanks everyone, and hopefully we can steal 5 minutes back. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers.